It's super clever. I mean, the argument is completely circular, right? They just say, you're a racist. And you say, well, but you have no evidence of my racism. They say, well, you don't even recognize your own racism. You say, well, then how am I a racist? They say, because you're complicit in a system of racism. You say, right, but the system isn't racist. Like, you can't point to something that's racist. No, but it results in racial inequality. And therefore, it is a racist system, and therefore you're complicit in the system, and therefore you're a racist. And you say, okay, well, but all systems perpetuate racial inequality. By even saying that, you're demonstrating your white fragility, which means you're a racist, right? Like, this is basic Salem witch trial. If you sink, then you're innocent, and if you float, then you're a witch.
We've sort of talked about this a little bit before, but do you think there is a fundamental reason for that? That there is a fundamental reason that underlies the philosophy of someone who broadly is on the left versus on the right, that why people on the right are willing to do it? If I put someone on the left on my show, I put Marianne Williamson on, I put on Andrew Yang, Tulsi Gabbard, all the people on the right, virtually, who disagree with them say, you know, I disagree with her and him on this and that and the other thing, but I'm glad you had the conversation. If I put you on, or Prager on, the lefties go bananas. I'm endorsing white supremacy and da-da-da-da.
Because I think that for the left, and there are many liberals who buy into this, all human relations are power relations. Right? You saw this in sort of Ezra Klein's response to Matt Yglesias, right? How did I end up on the same side as Matt Yglesias, a man I've called the Ralph Wiggum of the internet, right? Like, how has this happened? But Matt Yglesias had the temerity to sign that letter. And then Ezra Klein was like, there are a lot of people who stand up for free speech who are really doing this because it's a way of gaining power. And for a lot of people, this is, on the left, this is how they think of things, right? All human relationships are power dynamics. There are no big principles that we all share, like freedom of speech matters. That's just a bunch of people who are seeking to use the principle of freedom of speech as a weapon in order to reenact the hierarchy, in order to preserve the hierarchy. And this argument you see being made more and more by folks on the left, which is that rights are not actually universal principles that we all should hold to. Rights are just a way for me to shut you up while I'm still speaking, right? And I think that the liberal left has been somewhat warm to that argument for a while, at least warm enough that they were willing to hear it, and they just didn't see it turning on them at any point. The left moved so far, so fast that the liberals were like, we were with you up until the point where you started canceling us. And then we realized, oh wait, that was a bad mistake, right? Yglesias was one of the guys who was like cheering on there's no cancel culture, cancellation doesn't exist. And then it came for him, and he was like, this is bad, right, guys? It's like, yes, it's bad. Well, yes, thank you for recognizing it as bad.
Do you love seeing that now, where there's this move by them now, AOC is doing this and a bunch of other people, to completely tell us that cancel culture, it doesn't even exist. It doesn't exist.
Figment of your imagination. Figment of your, when she's not explaining that people are shooting each other in the inner city for bread.
For bread,
right? Which is that's why you shoot a 1-year-old at a playground, is because they're hungry. That's what I do when I'm hungry. You know, I say to my wife, "Are we out of cereal?" She says, "Yes," and I immediately go and shoot somebody in the face. That's the way I deal with my own personal hanger. But when she's not saying that sort of stuff, this is becoming a very popular notion on the left, which is that all America is a group of people who are dispossessed and the people who are victimizers. And any principle that exists in the system, that is the victimizing system, again, this goes back to the Kendi point or the Robin DiAngelo point, any aspect of that system is inherently bad and reinforces a power hierarchy, and so you must remove those systems of power in order to allow the dispossessed to claim their full share of the earth.
You're a sci-fi guy. Do you sort of admire the beauty of their evil? You know what I mean? Like, really, at some level, like, to create a system that proves itself. Yeah, in and of itself is the proof. Like, there's a certain beauty to that.
Oh, it's
as evil as it is.
It's super clever. I mean, the argument is completely circular, right? They just say, you're a racist, and you say, well, but you have no evidence of my racism. They say, well, you don't even recognize your own racism. You say, well, then how am I a racist? They say, because you're complicit in a system of racism. You say, right, but the system isn't racist. Like, you can't point to something that's racist. No, but it results in racial inequality, and therefore it is a racist system, and therefore you're complicit in the system, and therefore you're a racist. And you say, okay, well, but all systems perpetuate racial inequality. By even saying that, you're demonstrating your white fragility, which means you're a racist, right? Like, this is basic Salem witch trial. If you sink, then you're innocent, and if you float, then you're a witch.
Yeah, all right, so a lot of this actually is very much the point of the book. So just quickly, before we fully go into that, let's just do COVID quickly.
Sure.
Like, where the hell are we at in this? Let's just talk about California for a second. I mean, we just, in the last couple of days, went into another freaking lockdown. It's beautiful outside. I'm not sure what the beach situation is, whether we can go there, but I know I can't go to a restaurant. It's like, what the hell is going on here at this point? What do you think is honestly happening at this point?
So I think what's honestly happening is that you have a deadly disease that has probably somewhere between a 2 times and 6 times deadly as an effect as the flu. It's somewhere between 0.2 and 0.6 infection fatality rate. And that's dangerous, and it's very, very infectious, and all of that is true. The whole point of flattening the curve was to prevent the overwhelming of the healthcare system. We are not seeing the healthcare system being overwhelmed right now. And so the idea that the only tactic that is available is full-scale lockdown, I think, is not backed by evidence. I am also growing extraordinarily tired of people shouting that they are on the side of science while variously changing their opinion literally every 15 seconds. So when masks are bad, now masks are good. Protests are bad with anti-lockdown protests. Now, protests are good. And this woke virus spares you so long as you're kneeling for George Floyd, right?
I mean, think how bananas that is.
It's crazy. It's utterly nuts. I mean, that was mind-bogglingly incredible.
De Blasio this week said that, in effect. You
Right.
are allowed to protest because racism is so systemic and profoundly evil that somehow it supersedes the deadly virus.
It's a woke
but
virus,
everyone
man.
else, a couple Orthodox Jews playing in a park in Brooklyn, we got a problem.
It's a seriously woke virus. I mean, good for Colin Kaepernick, who should win the Nobel Peace Prize as well as the Nobel Prize in biology, because kneeling, it turns out, actually cures coronavirus, which is pretty awesome when you think about it. But it's, you know, I think that there have been a bunch of false binaries that have been set up, and those false binaries are things like it's either total lockdown or total openness. It annoys me when people on the right treat mask wearing as though it's like a virtue signal, and it annoys me on the left when people treat mask wearing as though it's an incredible virtue signal. You're an evil, evil person if you're not wearing a mask when you go to sleep at night, and you're a better person if you wear a mask. And on the right, there are people for sure who are like, well, I'm not wearing a mask under any circumstance. It's a violation of my freedoms and all this kind of stuff. Like, look, just when you're in a populated area with a lot of other people, wear a mask. It isn't that bad. Like, you should do it because you don't want other people to get sick. It's like, that's the best we can do at this point in time. With that said, the idea that we're going to full-scale lock down the entire American economy, or that we are going to leave children out of school for the next year because of COVID, like, that seems patently insane to me. I mean, the reason it seems patently insane is because the data are pretty murky on a lot of issues. They're absolutely not murky on the risk to children. There is so little risk to children. If you're under the age of 20, you have a better chance of dying from the flu than you do of COVID. I mean, that's just a straight stat. And what that means is that maybe we can come up with some creative solutions where parents actually have a place where their kids can go for schooling. So my friend John Podhoretz over at Commentary Magazine, I thought he had a good idea. He said, why don't you keep the schools open, and then you have a bunch of 20-year-old proctors, and then you have the teachers Zoom in. Why is it the teacher has to Zoom to all the kids at home, right? Why don't you just do it at school, right? That seems like a fairly decent idea. But the incentive structure is created for politicians to lock down, because the more sternly you treat the virus, the better the media are going to treat you.
Right, the more virtuous you are.
Right, exactly. And this is how you see Andrew Cuomo, who was a garbage heap of a governor during this whole time, and who now creates magical posters, tributes to himself, with literally a curve that represents the number of dead bodies in his state, right, being treated as though he was great at this, when his death rate is like 8 or 9 times that of Florida, where Ron DeSantis is the font of all evil, and Greg Abbott in Texas, it's like 11 or 12 times the death rate in Texas. Like, none of the media coverage makes sense. The media, there are a bunch of issues here. The politics of it makes no sense. The media coverage of it makes some sense, but it's a really ugly sense because the politics have overwhelmed the data. And then on a data level, there's just a lot we actually don't know at this point. Right? We don't know whether there's such a thing as T-cell immunity. That's been one of the theories, that herd immunity actually may start to kick in as low as 20%. This is a theory from Sweden. It could be at 60%. We don't know whether this thing is how far away you have to be from somebody. They say 6 feet, but the WHO was saying a meter until 5 minutes ago.
By the way, technically, my guys measured. We're 7 feet away.
Oh, yeah, no, and I insisted on that. Like, I'm a person who's taking this very seriously, right? I mean, I've been taking it seriously because I have 65-year-old parents. So I'm not on the let's be skeptical of all of this stuff. But the idea that, like, it's going to wipe out vast swaths of the American public, and that it's the most dangerous thing that has ever existed on planet Earth, and that we have to shut down the economy ad infinitum. Here's the problem. Has anyone ever actually done, on the lockdown side, any analysis of what the costs are on the other side? All I hear is if you mention those costs, then you're bad and you don't care about human beings.
Right.
And that's insane. Like, these are public policy decisions, and we should obviously be having conversations about how to protect the most vulnerable, and also how to tranche people back into work. I mean, I've been saying for a long time that it may end up being that the way that we end up moving forward is what one, I think it was Hebrew University, or Tel Aviv University scientists suggested, was controlled avalanche. The idea was, if you're most vulnerable, you stay home and we figure out ways to protect you. And if you're less vulnerable, then you go out, and if you get it, you get it. And then you're one person closer to herd immunity. That may be effectively de facto what we're seeing anyway, right? Because this is how, let's be real about this. If you're 20, this is kind of how you're treating it.
Ben, this is where they're going to say you want to kill people.
Right.
That's what, last time you were here for my book launch. And
I remember.
The video, you were the #1 trend on Twitter, because you said we're going to have to deal with some level of death. It's a problem. We don't want to, but that's just reality. And then they came after you and said, no one should die in our perfect world.
I made the very pure and obvious.
Which everyone
everyone understands the argument I was making, which is that if you're looking at days of life versus just lives lost, that is a different calculation, and it is done by actuaries every single day. The federal government has actuaries that do this on every single policy. But again, the media narrative is very easy here. If you don't mirror the policies they want, then you're a grandma killer who wants to murder your own grandma. It doesn't matter that I'm taking all sorts of extraordinary, measures in order to protect my own parents on this thing.
If you're looking for more honest and thoughtful conversations about politics instead of nonstop yelling, check out our politics playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a variety of topics, watch our full episode playlist all right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.